to go through and explain each one of our panelists here is Michelle Arrowood. She's the Executive Director of Advocates for Victims of Abuse in Langley County, or is it AVAIL? AVAIL, for short. She's also an active member for the Northern Wisconsin Initiative to Stop Homelessness. Her experiences have brought about acute awareness of the challenges and barriers individuals and families face as they try to combat hunger and homelessness in rural communities. Next, we have Tammy Modic, Executive Director for the Northwoods Alliance for Temporary Housing in Rhinelander. Nath owns and operates Frederick Place, a 16-bed emergency temporary shelter for families, women, and men who are experiencing homelessness. Although located in Rhinelander, the Frederick Place serves those in need in the entire northeastern portion of the 7th Congressional District. And finally, but not least, Nancy Kraft, the Director of Program and Resource Development for Indianhead Community Action Agency. Nancy's primary role is developing new programs and seeking funding to support the various programs and services provided in 6 primary counties and up to an additional 14 counties in the western and northwestern part of the Congressional District. We will start today with Michelle.
Great? Okay. Thank you for hanging in there. I was listening to the panelists before, and it's all very important information, but to talk a whole day about homelessness is, it's hard because there aren't a lot of solutions to the problems that we're facing. I can tell you that I sort of backed into homelessness. I came from doing child protection for Langley County. Langley County is about 45 miles northeast of here, where Antigo sits. I did child protection for 8 years and then moved into being the executive director of the domestic violence shelter where I work. Have been there about 12 years now, so in total about 20 years supporting victims of violence. I can tell you that there are bigger problems than being homeless sometimes, and one of those things is to be a victim of violence. What I often have to tell people that I'm working with is that they are now homeless as well, and that's hard. It's a harsh reality. When you're coming from a family, a background where you were in a space where you were trusting people and thinking that you were safe, and all of a sudden you're not. You may not have access to your checkbook, you may not have access to your finances, your credit may be ruined when you come to me, and you may just be happy to be alive and with your children. That is the reality of the framework that I'm in. When we work with victims, as they come into the shelter, they will come to us from various sources. They will come to us from law enforcement, from the social services systems occasionally, but also from self-referral. And that was the interesting thing that I learned when I came from social services to domestic violence, was that I was not working with the same clientele. These were not the identical clients that I had served in my previous employment. Some of them were very independent and actually trying to get ahead of the system, getting a hold of them. And so we try to keep that spirit, that independence alive when they come into the domestic violence shelter where I work. When they come in, we talk with them about what resources they have accessed, what support systems, what natural supports they might already have, family, friends that they might not have considered, things to help keep them strong. However, it's difficult. The facility that I work in is a 5-bedroom home, remodeled, donated in part from a community member. And we've used that home this last year to provide over 2,000 nights of shelter with 5 bedrooms. It is not unusual for us to serve 5 to 18 households in a month. And a household is defined as an adult, single adult, or an adult and children. It is not unusual for the families that we serve to have to share a bedroom in the space that we're in. And I'm trying to think about time as I'm going. I could talk about this all day. As we move forward, what AVAIL can provide and does provide, and as most domestic violence shelters, I should back up. That's the thing that's confusing for folks sometimes. Each community has a shelter, pretty much. Each county does. And we all are private nonprofit 501c3s. And so we each have a different name. For example, Haven in Merrill is the program. Stepping Stones is in Medford. AVAIL is in Antigo. We are all our own private industry, our own private entity. However, we do network together to make sure that victims have services. So if I don't have room in my shelter, I will pick up the phone and call Merrill and make sure that this person has a place to stay for the night for free. If not, I will find a hotel room for them so that they can go there. That we can only do on a limited basis because of budget. But when folks come in to work with us, we can and do provide not only a shelter, a safe place. There are advocates that work with them 24/7 to help them to be strong. We help them with employment and housing. We transport them to appointments with social services, law enforcement, medical care if they need it. We provide childcare for their children while they're attending those appointments so they don't have to worry so much. And we just try to bridge the gaps that they will face once they leave us. The harsh reality is that we are in a county that has no public transportation. We have 3 school districts, but no public transportation between those points. Clients that come to us oftentimes are seeking second and third shift jobs with no childcare available to them. Without a car, it's very difficult to get your kids where they need to go. And sometimes social services does become involved at that point when needs aren't being met and things happen. One of the scariest things for a client that is coming to us is the fact that they are afraid that they would lose their children to the system and to the abuser. So I can tell you just briefly that we're working with folks that are mostly children. Looking at our demographics, those are the people that we're serving more than anybody. Over 50% of the people that we serve are children. 40% are women and roughly 10% each year are men. We work hard to partner with the homelessness folks. We've just sort of redefined ourselves to realize that we are in that boat with the folks that are dealing with the homelessness issue. I do the point in time count for Langley County, me and my husband. We go out at 3 o'clock in the morning and look for folks. It's a little tough because Langley County did not recognize that as an issue. As I would call the police chief, as I would call folks that I knew from the systems. That doesn't happen here, Michelle. No, I can't tell you where to find folks. But we do actively search, and if folks know of somebody, I ask them a few weeks before, please let me know, and we pull it together. I'm glad for the communication and the connection with NWISH and with Frederick Place and the other homeless shelters in our community. One of the challenges we face is if somebody does not qualify due to domestic violence or sexual assault, we cannot serve them. And so one of the issues would be transportation to get them to one of the places that could serve them. I'm trying to think of other challenges that you might need to hear about that we face every day. Just getting folks around and getting them to the places that they need. How am I doing for time?
You're doing good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. I'm a fast talker from the east.
How many times do you see the same victim until they finally break from their abuser?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can speak to that. The average person leaves their abuser 7 times before it's final. However, let me just say that the folks that come to shelter are able to get up and moving most times in 30 days, which, if you think about it, is quite amazing. If you're coming into a situation where you're just with the clothes on your back, pretend your house burned. You had to leave with just nothing but the clothes you were wearing. Could you rebuild yourself in 30 days? Could you find a job, a house, get your kids to school, maybe change their enrollment status so that dad couldn't find them? Could you do that in 30 days and be okay? It's interesting. We have a maximum stay of 60 days. If somebody, we set goals with them when they come into the shelter. So if somebody is working toward that end, we will look at, okay, what's working for you, what's not working for you. Maybe Langley County isn't the place. Maybe you have some skills that would take you to Chihuahua and you would do well there. We will help to coordinate with the shelter there to get them to where they need to be.
What do you do with the follow-up program to see how the person's progressing through their change?
That's the one place that we are unique. Services are completely voluntary and client self-determined. We want to keep folks as independent and free as they possibly can be because they've come from the absolute worst. So if a client would want to come and continue with us, they are able to do that. We will follow with them. I can tell you of clients that we have worked with for 15 to 20 years at AVAIL. The organization is 30 years old. So it's quite possible that we are working with children of those folks that have been abused that are positively associating the program with safety and come to us when needed. So it's an important thing. Yeah. I guess in closing, I would just say that it's a special problem. It's a different category than the typical homelessness because there is the safety issue. When we're working with victims of violence, sometimes they can't go outside or go to the grocery store, or it's just a whole different set of things that are being presented. We work with the school districts with the McKinney-Vento Act to get the kids to and from school safely. It's really a wraparound service. So I guess if you were, as providers, hearing some stuff that would seem either emotionally, psychologically, physically abusive, sexually abusive, consider turning to your local domestic violence shelter as a resource. We can slow things down, work with that victim to address the emotional, psychological, sometimes addiction issues that they are facing and help them to get pointed into the right area by taking the time to spend with them in 24-hour service that can get them to what they need. I'll end with that.
Thank you, Michelle. Tammy, you're next to talk about Northwoods Alliance for Temporary Housing.
Right, thank you much. Again, Northwoods Alliance for Temporary Housing, or NAP. I'm going to start a little bit about explaining the who and where we are. We are a new organization. NAP opened Frederick Place, which is a 16-bed emergency temporary shelter that does service 5 counties, Oneida, Lincoln, Langley, Forest, and Vilas County, on January 31st of 2011. Like Congressman Duffy said and others have said, people in rural communities in northern Wisconsin do not believe that homelessness exists. I'm here to tell you that we've had 290 individuals call Frederick Place home since we opened our doors. That includes 43 children, or 15% of that population. We have turned away well over 350 individuals, either because they didn't meet the criteria or the shelter was full. Our youngest resident was 2 days old. Our oldest resident was 78 years old. So that average age of those 290 individuals is right around 33 years old. Frederick Place can provide up to 90 days stay for an individual. The average stay so far is somewhere right around 40 days. To date, we've provided over 11,000 shelter nights since we opened our doors. This morning you heard a lot about the ESG and the SSG and the alphabet soup and the funding and how much Wisconsin does receive. Frederick Place annual operating budget for 24 hours staffing as well as case management for 2013 was $205,000, so approximately $40 a day per resident when the house is full. We have received approximately $18,000 or less than 9% of our budget from that alphabet soup of ESG, SSG, DPI funding, FEMA, any of the government, state and federal funding. So, just being able to provide, one of the barriers, which was kind of our topic here, certainly has to do with funding. Be able to find those other donors, those other volunteers to help support those in-kind donations of things off your wish list, items for residents who come to. That's certainly been a challenge over the years that we've been open. I came up with 3, and I'm a fast talker too, so I came up with 3 topics that I felt were barriers since I've been in this position. It's been mentioned time and time again, transportation. Located in Rhinelander, 60% of our residents have come from Oneida County. The rest have come from the other 5 counties in the area, but no public transportation. Large geographic area. You've got someone who's calling you from Langley County, from the shelter, trying to find a way for them to get up to Rhinelander to be able to stay at the shelter. Then do they want to stay there? The McKinney-Vento Act, getting their kids back to Langley County on a daily basis because they're eligible to attend school in the county they came, or the school district they came from. That's been a challenge. Affordable housing. 90 days goes by really quick. What do they do once they leave Frederick Place? Approximately 34% of our residents have found some form of employment, most often part-time, minimum wage employment. Oneida County, through Forward Service, has 8 what we call slots for transitional housing in all of Oneida County. I just told you I've had 290 people come through the shelter in 3 years. So obviously you have to be one of the lucky ones to be the next one on the waiting list when that slot opens up. We do utilize the rapid rehousing dollars through NewCap, provides those funding to our residents, and have had probably 10% of our residents who have gotten transitional housing through NewCap's rapid rehousing. One of the partners that we were able to put together for a short time that I would love when we talk about the ideal, where could we go next, we did have one renter in Rhinelander who agreed to take one of our residents and give them a 6-month lease similar to Section 8 or HUD housing. And just a private renter who said, I'll take 30% of your income on a monthly basis for your rent. They weren't getting subsidized by HUD or Section 8, but they agreed to do that. So that would be one of my hopes, to look into the future to see if there are more renters who would be willing to do that. I think the last barrier that we've seen a lot, which came up in this morning's discussion, is access to mental health and health care. The waiting list for most mental health providers in Oneida County and the northern region is at least 12 months, as well as with the Human Service Center trying to get case managers for someone who has an active mental health disability, as well as medication management. I mean, a lot of our residents who have mental health are on medication that needs to be managed. A lot of that medication management is happening through video conferencing with someone because they don't have doctors who come every week or every month to the site, so they're doing it through video conferencing. It gets done, but it's certainly not, the most humane way to do that. I think the partnerships that was talked about before is what's been huge, and it has been a way to work through some of these barriers. We have volunteer drivers who have taken some of our residents to the Twin Cities to get on an airplane to go to a job they found out in Colorado. We've had volunteer drivers who have taken them to the Milwaukee area where they have family and they moved in with. So we've been lucky in that standpoint, but oftentimes it's been very difficult to find and deal with some of these barriers. But affordable housing is definitely probably the top problem here.
Great, thank you. Can you give us some information on, maybe your public campaign or awareness in your community on your shelter and the effects of that?
Okay, I think one of the positives for NAP and Frederick Place has been that I've been a member of the Rhinelander community for over 20 years, worked in the school district prior, so was a known entity. I was talking with Dr. Abel that my 15 minutes of fame was up a long time ago, but the local media has been very supportive of us in all of our 5 counties, have been very much promoting campaigns, whether it is a soup for shelter that happens in 3 of our communities, whether it is a campaign we just finished in November, Everybody Deserves Shelter campaign, as well as anniversary. I mean, fundraising is huge, and our committee is not only called fundraising, but it's community outreach and fundraising. So going out there in November alone, I did 13, but total we did 15 speaking engagements. Because not only do we need to tell people who NAP is and what Frederick Place does from a funding standpoint, but also from a standpoint of letting people know who we are if they need to access us or know of someone who needs assistance in dealing with homelessness.
Does your organization do look at private foundations for financial support that have grant opportunities?
Correct. We do have a grant committee who seeks out and looks for grants. Most of them are short-term. We have found that it's a lot harder to find grants and even foundations to deal with operations, much easier to find the dollars to deal with bricks and mortar. So I think that the challenge in purchasing and renovating Frederick Place, although it was a big challenge, was a lot easier from a grant standpoint and those foundations than it oftentimes is for operations.
Thank you very much, and then we'll move to Nancy.
I'm going to use Okay, I think I got it. Okay, in addressing the challenges in delivering assistance to rural communities, I'm not going to focus only on the concrete aspects. We've heard those all day. But I'm also going to ground my short presentation in the larger, can you hear me? Okay, in the larger socio-economic and political challenges facing rural communities and delivering assistance to children, families, and individuals in need. Indianhead Community Action Agency is one of about 16 community action agencies in Wisconsin that provides a variety of services and programs to low-income individuals in 6 primary counties. And my role in that agency is I'm a one-person department in charge of looking for grants and looking for funding to keep all of our programs going. Our mission is to assist individuals in achieving self-sufficiency by providing the resources, education, and services necessary to develop healthy families, sustainable communities, and strong local businesses. According to the county health rankings developed by the Population Health Institute at the University of Wisconsin, 40% of a person's health outcomes are dependent on the social and economic determinants of health. And that is precisely what we as a community action agency are about, impacting all those other factors that affect the health and well-being of the populace. And with all the funding cuts at the federal and the state levels and foundation funding drying up, it does make delivery of assistance, especially in rural areas that lack so many resources, a very, very difficult job. If other community action agencies in our region do not offer certain programs, we are able to extend the reach of some of our programs into these other counties. And such is the case with 4 other programs, a home health services program, and we do have a legal assistance for victims program. Unfortunately, it's not in your county, but it is in 15 counties in the state of Wisconsin. And we have 2 attorneys that provide free legal services to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and dating violence. And in the time that program has been operational, we've helped over 300 women to achieve a sense of security and independence and free themselves finally from their abusers. And, funding is so important for these programs, so we have to continue to find funding, because if it wasn't for these programs, I don't know what these 300 women would have done. I think some of them would be dead, quite frankly. I'm sorry, but after hearing your case, it's so difficult. Weatherization is another program that we offer in other counties, as is business development. And these are, the blue counties are the ones that we work in, Burnett, Clark, Rusk, Sawyer, Taylor, and Washburn, but the other counties are those that we have programs in. I'm going to be focusing a lot on looking at issues of hunger, because that's where we focus a lot of our attention. But we are now a recent recipient of supportive services for veterans and their families. And so we are working closely with continuums of care to address the housing needs of homeless individuals, in addition to ensuring that those veterans' families have access to other resources. But these are the challenges that we're faced with in rural areas. To provide a context to the region and the issues surrounding the challenges, the first one I really want to look at is the issue of poverty. And this morning in the presentation by the UW Extension, all the dark blue counties were our counties, the ones that are in such dire shape. 17,456 individuals collectively between the 6 counties we primarily serve are living at 100% poverty. That is more than the population of several of our counties. Well, Sawyer has the highest rate of poverty at 18.8%. Wages in Rusk County are the lowest of all our counties, with the lowest per capita as well as the lowest median household income. The living wage is what it would require for a person to be able to live without any assistance. And in Rusk County, one of the poorest counties in the state, for one adult and one child, it would take $18.79 an hour to pay for rent, for food, for health care, for transportation, for child care, to keep your head above water. This amounts to nearly twice the median income in Wisconsin. For one adult with 2 children, it's even more, and many of our single parents have definitely more than 1 child. This is important to note because you can see the large difference between the reality, the per capita, and what it really takes to live in Rusk County. Now, challenges of being a single parent. The prior figures concerning wage differentials are critical, given that such a large percentage of children in single parents live in our counties. 29.3%, or 8,049 children, birth to 17, live in our counties. That's close to 1/3 of all the children in our counties living in single parent households. And as these children grow up in poverty, they then qualify for free and reduced lunches in schools, which is being threatened with cuts to the hot lunch programs in schools. And this is devastating because we have 15,334 children among our 6 counties that qualify for free and reduced lunch. Now, another issue then on the other end of the scale is the increasing challenges with elderly. Elderly who are on fixed incomes. And that is definitely increasing in northern counties. 1/5 of the population in these counties is 65 years and older. 23,043 adults are in that age category. And these are folks on fixed incomes. We did a survey in one of our food pantries. We have food pantries in all 6 counties that are run by Indianhead, and in the Rusk County Food Pantry, we did a survey this past year of folks coming to the food pantry. Of 151 residents, 71% of the elderly said they are worried whether food would run out before they got more money, or the month is longer than the money that they have. Seniors often find themselves having to juggle between purchasing food, medications, or fuel to heat their homes. And then in that same questionnaire, you can see here that more than 50% said they can't afford to eat balanced meals all the time because they don't have sufficient food. So we do have challenges with cuts to SNAP. Given the high rates of poverty, impoverished children and seniors, the challenges in delivering assistance to rural communities is impacted by proposed and real SNAP cuts that Congress voted on. As shown in the prior statistics with the large numbers of children in single-parent homes, the number of children living in poverty, the increasing numbers of elderly on fixed incomes, it is important to realize that the majority of people participating in the SNAP program are children, the elderly, and the disabled, and a small percentage of non-elderly, non-disabled adults, and perhaps those are the working poor. But yet, mammoth cuts are being proposed, which will seriously hurt children, the elderly, and disabled adults. Another challenge we have is the fact that we have multiple food deserts in the region with huge numbers of children, low-income adults, and elderly with limited access to obtaining quality food, such as fresh fruits and vegetables, milk, and other healthy foods. A food desert in a rural area means that you have to travel more than 10 miles to find fresh food. And in Sawyer County, we actually have 3 census tracts of food deserts. But in one of those census tracts, 100% of the people live in a food desert. And you'll notice we have 265 housing units without a vehicle. And so, of course, if they don't have transportation, how are they going to get access to food? And Sawyer, this chart just shows that Sawyer has the highest number of children and adults living in a food desert. The spike is Sawyer County. And we saw this one earlier today. This is the entire 7th Congressional District is shrouded in the highest food hardship rate in Wisconsin. This last year, through the Indianhead food pantries, we served 9,239 unduplicated individuals at our food pantries. So we have challenges of high unemployment and low wages. These pose definitely another challenge that we're facing in delivering assistance. You know, if the minimum wage was increased, it would solve a lot of problems. But there's real resistance to raising the minimum wage. Then there's challenges for charitable organizations. You know, there's a common belief that churches should be the ones picking up the slack. But this is totally unrealistic. Churches are not able to raise sufficient funding to make up the difference with what the federal government decides to do in cutting food assistance. I was at a Food Research Action Council conference in Washington, D.C. earlier this year, and I learned that every church in the United States would have to raise $50,000 a year for 10 years to make up the difference in food aid provided by the federal government. Now, when you look around in church, you see a lot of white-haired people on fixed incomes, rural churches, you know, there's no way. They don't even have operating budgets of $50,000. So that's not realistic. We have challenges of the voiceless. We have many poor, working poor, and low income who are voiceless and at the mercy of the powerful in this country. They are poor due to no jobs or low-paying jobs. They often have to resort to predatory lenders. We have 8 in the region that I'm in. Of the 20 small business loans that our CDFI, we have a community development financial institution at Indianhead, and of the 20 small business loans that we gave to people in the last couple of years, all of these folks were turned down by conventional lenders for their business startups. So these people have to resort then sometimes to predatory lenders if they don't have any other alternative. Nobody seems to be representing the poor. There's only one registered lobbyist in Washington, D.C., and maybe the new Pope. But he is facing rampant criticism from the right and being labeled a Marxist because he's following the message in the Bible of looking out for the least of these, which isn't happening in Washington. So the burden shifts to local organizations and churches, organizations such as ours, and it poses real challenges in delivering assistance when there just is not funding. And I tell you, it's stressful looking for grants. I have a big grant due December 23rd, and then another one due January 16th. So there goes my holiday, I guess. It's tough. It's really hard work. One of the biggest challenges we face is misplaced attitudes that are often held by folks who are just one step out of poverty themselves. These people tend to look at those who are poor and in need of assistance and label them as slackers, lazy, takers, the 47%, and they often quote Bible verses taken out of context that are often used in an accusatory tone to condemn these people. It's a blame the victim mentality. And this goes on in these small rural areas. You hear it all the time. It's these attitudes then that influence political decisions at the polls, that put individuals in office maybe then who don't give voice to the voiceless. Instead of looking at how all Americans can enjoy a better quality of life, there is a race to the bottom mentality that exists. Low-income people are looked down on and called welfare recipients, or worse yet, single mothers are referred to as welfare queens. But nobody is questioning corporate welfare, only monetary support, as minimal as it is to help people who are in need. More challenges of misplaced attitudes. You know, when did the government become the bad guy? People don't realize or understand that the government, I think I'm ahead of myself. Sorry, I'm getting a little worked up here, you can see. How to help people, how to turn people on. Okay. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. When did the government, become the bad guy? You know, we need to realize that we are the government. That the government's role is to provide a safety net and a hand up. We need to be educating people about the issues so that we can dispel those misplaced attitudes. And changing attitudes and mindsets is probably the greatest challenge that we have as an agency in delivering assistance to low-income people. A final challenge in delivering assistance to rural communities is being able to name the problem for what it is. It isn't, and it shouldn't be about charity, but rather it's a matter of justice. How can we make sure that the poor and low-income children, families, and individuals have voice, have access to the same opportunities and rights of the more affluent, have decent and well-paying jobs, more than the $8 an hour that some of our largest corporations offer, that then end up forcing these people to go on to assistance? You know, how do we change that? So in summary, I want to end with a quote by Marshall Gans with the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Poverty is merely the miner's canary, alerting the broader polity to the presence of systemic problems, growing inequality, declining access to quality education, increasingly insecure labor conditions, and a political process too paralyzed to tackle these crises. Thank you.
The 6 primary counties that you covered, and the challenges, which there are several. Can you point, is there some examples of some bright spots you're finding in those communities with the organizations that you work with and your ability to overcome some of these challenges?
Well, our Legal Assistance for Victims program, as I shared earlier, 300 women have been helped through that program. That's amazing. We had a state grant through Transitional Jobs a few years ago when that grant was open. And we had actually the highest placement rate in the state. And we were working with people who were on TANF, and there were so many eligibility requirements connected to that grant. And we ended up placing, I think, about 120 people in unsubsidized jobs, which is pretty remarkable given the fact in rural counties, there just aren't a lot of jobs. We now are also a DVR contractor, and we are working with, DVR clients. And 8 of our DVR clients have started businesses through our small business development program. And DVR has been a wonderful partner because DVR will pay for all the equipment for these people, for their businesses. And so it's given those 8 people with disabilities a sense of independence. We have a transit system. We are probably one of the few we serve a lot of counties, but in Russ County, we are one of the few counties in the state that has a transit system countywide that has been going for 30 years. And every person in the county has access to transit, and I heard that's major challenges that you're facing. Unfortunately, we only have that in Russ County. I could go on and on. We've had many good things that have happened, but it's a continual challenge. This past year has been the most difficult year in securing funding. And it gets depressing when you keep getting rejections and you spend 3 weeks of your life putting together an 80-page proposal. And I mean, it's very hard. Sequestration has really impacted us. Foundation funding is drying up. It's just really tough, and you feel a real sense of responsibility if you don't succeed in getting that grant. People's lives are at stake sometimes, and so it's just kind of an awesome challenge and very daunting.
So first of all, I'd like to thank the panel. Please give a round of applause for our panel. We're going to go into a couple of Q&A real quick before, we're actually going to bypass the break, if that's okay with everybody, and move into the group discussion after the question and answer. Is there any questions from the audience? Please remember to state your name and who you represent.
I'm an Indianhead.
You should mention who's the funder of this Violence Against Women's project?
Well, our major funder is the U.S. Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women. And then, I tell you, about a year ago, when the Violence Against Women's Act wasn't being passed because of some differences certain groups had, as to who was going to be covered, we were sweating bullets. We didn't know if our program would be funded again. And even though we did get a $400,000 grant, we're in 15 counties. We cover nearly 14,000 miles. We have only 2 attorneys. So the Otto Bremer Foundation has been very gracious in kind of filling that gap. But I'm always scrounging for money for that program. We got to keep it going, and it should be really a state program. We need it.
Okay, any other questions? Any questions? Well, thank you, panel, for participating, and appreciate your support.